It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we've got Ray Fittipaldo. We're going to talk about Ray's first mock draft of the offseason. Where does he see the Steelers targeting as Senior Bowl week kicks off? We'll talk about that. Also, Art Rooney to talk this week, what questions we have for him, and our reactions to how the playoffs played out this week, and all here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined by one of our great Steelers beat writers, Ray Fittipaldo. And as always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injured victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, it is that time of the season when we start looking towards the future and seeing who do the Steelers want to bring in and what way to do that to better start that than the first mock draft of the season. You did a seven round mock draft over the weekend. We're going to go over those picks and get into the targets here. So not to waste any time, let's go over your first round pick. And you have the Steelers going for defensive line. They get Shamar Stewart, Texas defensive lineman, 6'6", 291 guy, a big fella there, but a guy, it's also funny, there are two Shamars from Texas A&M, not only in this draft class that play defensive line, but at the Senior Bowl. There's Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. Shamar Turner is the more inside guy. He's a little thicker and shorter. Shamar Stewart, he's been playing a little bit more outside. I'm curious, Ray, because he plays a lot more on the edge. Do you see him as the guy that converts inside for the Steelers moving forward?
Yeah, well, at Texas A&M, you would see him in a 2-point stance and a 3-point stance. So, in the games that I watched, it was probably about half and half. So he did have that flexibility in college. I just think his body type is exactly what the Steelers are looking for in a 5 technique. And we all know Cam Hayward is going to turn 36 here in a couple of months. He's been playing great, but eventually you're going to need need his replacement. And Stewart, body type wise, certainly would fit that bill. So there were a number of different directions that I could have gone here. Kenneth Grant from Michigan is a popular pick for the Steelers. He's probably a bigger, nose type with a little bit of flexibility to bump out to 3. Guys like Mason Graham are going to be gone. So if you're looking in that range, like where the Steelers are going to be picking, say 15 through 25, Stewart's probably one of 3 or 4 guys who could possibly be in that range among the D tackles. And, I think maybe he's a little bit of a projection, but I also think he probably has the most upside of any defensive tackle in this class as well.
I think his size is ridiculous, and if he can convert that into power and beating people at the line of scrimmage, the Steelers would absolutely welcome that. But let's get to the overall philosophy here. Some people are going to be shaking their fist at your, Ray, saying, "Why aren't you going on offense? They need wide receivers. They need this. They need that." What makes defensive line to you the value point where they should go in the first round and get him? Because I agree with you.
Yeah, I think if you look at my 8 picks, I want to say 6 were offense, maybe 5. So I do address offense later in the draft, but it was just a bad end of the season for the defense, Chris. And you got some guys aging out. I mentioned Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, probably going to be a cap casualty, but Larry is into his early 30s now. And you got a bunch of guys like him. Dean Lowry probably isn't going to be back. He's in his early 30s. So I think it's time to get younger on the defensive line. If you look at the teams that are still alive in the playoffs, Chris, look at what the Eagles have done. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, number 97, who was a third-round pick for them a few years back. I forget his name, but they just invest year after year in their defensive line, and it's one of the reasons that they're in the Super Bowl. Look at the Chiefs. Yeah, you have Chris Jones, who's a savvy vet, but they went out and got Karlaftis a few years ago in the draft, and they just continue to add pieces down there as well. And that Chiefs front is really, really stout. You saw that in that game. We'll talk about that later. You say what you want about that spot, but 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 for the Bills on Sunday night. It was tough sledding whether they got those first downs or not. So, to me, I think you have to be strong in the trenches. Could they take a receiver? Yeah, they could. That's very much a real possibility, but I just think defensive line is the direction that is certainly a distinct possibility as well.
No, I'm with you. I think defensive line is certainly along the lines. We've been talking about this for months where, like, hey, even without the way that the season ended with how they got ran over by the Ravens, you could see, hey, Larry Gunjobi's not that guy. They kind of need another person to pair with Keanu Benton for the long term and listen, this team, if they want to be the type of team that they're talking about, they got to be physical up front on both sides of the ball. They've been investing in the O-line. D-line makes a lot of sense. But let's get to your other picks here. Round 2, you do go get wide receiver. Elic Ayomanor. I probably messed that guy's name up but he's a receiver from Stanford, 6'2", 210. What'd you see from him to make him the receiver you think the Steelers should go get?
Yeah, really good contested catch guy. He can go up and get it. He's a big physical receiver. But also when I watched him too, he wasn't like this one-trick pony who would only get 50-50 deep balls. He actually could run the intermediate routes as well. Big body. You see him go over the middle a lot as well. So I think he would be, a good fit for the Steelers, in this draft. I know a lot of people are mocking receivers to the Steelers in the first. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. I think Daniel Jeremiah mocked them a receiver, Golden from Texas. So that's that's certainly going to be something that we're talking about here. But among the second round targets, Ayomanor, big guy. He's got a little bit of juice to him as well. I'm not sure how he's going to test, but his height, his big body. I think he's a guy that could be a good fit for this Arthur Smith. Awesome.
And he'll be at the Senior Bowl as well, so the Steelers will be able to get a closer look at him there. Moving right down, another guy that's at the Senior Bowl, quarterback Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. Now, Ray, if there is a mercurial quarterback as far as how people feel about this guy, Jalen Milroe is that guy. There's some people that feel like, oh, he's the perfect project. He's big, he's fast. He has a cannon. You can just put him in there and just work with him. And there's other people like, what are you talking about? He is not as fast as Justin Fields with not as good of an arm and makes a lot more mistakes. Why would you do this to yourself? Ray, why do you see Jalen Milroe being the move in the 3rd round for the Steelers here?
Yeah, let's see how he tests. I'm not quite so sure that he won't run as well as Justin did. When he did the combine a few years back. We'll find out. He's probably the best athlete in this quarterback class. And to me, Chris, if you're going to settle for Russell Wilson or Justin Fields to be your starter in 2026 and or 2027, if you're going to take a shot at a guy, and let's face it, the Steelers have the 21st pick. So unless there's some kind of, major trade up where they trade all their draft picks to get into the top 5, it's not a realistic possibility that you're going to get that guy this year. So why not do it in the 3rd round? If you draft somebody else in the 3rd round, he doesn't pan out, who cares? Just because it's a quarterback, I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it. I think as long as you don't have your franchise quarterback on your roster, you should probably, try every avenue to go out and find that guy. So he's definitely a project. I'm not going to sit here and debate that, but if you would have Wilson or Fields on your team, you could work with him, redshirt him this year, work him in easy. Aaron Rodgers sat for how many years? 3 years before he took over. If you have a long-term plan and you think you can develop this guy and make him into an NFL quarterback, what's the hurt for a 3rd round pick?
And then rounding out your draft, you had Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas in the 4th round, Quincy Riley, cornerback out of Louisville in the 5th. Then you see it with three 7th-round picks. You have an offensive lineman from Georgia, safety from Ohio State, and another offensive lineman from Alabama and A&M. But looking at those two earlier picks, Devin Neal and Quincy Riley, those are other two needs here. Running back, I think running back is going to be really tricky for the Steelers this offseason because you don't want to overinvest at running back, but you need another presence back there with Jalen Warren. Devin Neal, I believe, one of the faster options that you could get in the middle rounds of this draft. I think Quincy Riley, a versatile player who you can add in the secondary.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what Neal runs. I watched him. He had over 300 yards in a game against Colorado. I watched that. Mm-hmm. He ran hard too. Like, it wasn't just, he wasn't just a speed guy. He was breaking tackles against that Colorado defense as well. So I think he's a good player. But Chris, this is, you can get a running back pretty much 2nd round, maybe even through the 4th round. You could probably get a starting caliber guy. It's a really deep class, and there's going to be all kinds of opportunities for the Steelers to get that guy this year. So I wonder, maybe Andy Weidel and Omar Khan will be asked this, in this pre-draft process. I guess we'll get a chance to talk to Omar at the Combine. But was one of the reasons they declined the 5th-year option on Najee is because they knew this college class was coming. When they do the draft, they're not only looking at this year. They're looking a couple of years ahead in the talents that's there. So I'm not going to say it's going to be easy to replace Najee Harris, but whether it's Neal or somebody else, they should be able to get a pretty good sidekick to Jalen Warren in the middle rounds of this draft.
Well, you talked about talking to Omar Khan. This it looks like we will get a chance to hear from Arthur Rooney now this week, and we want to talk about what questions we ask there. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the question, what's next? Call 1-800-94-EDGAR. Visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, so with Art Rooney set to talk, it's going to be interesting to see what Art Rooney II has to say to reporters on this Monday. We haven't heard from him yet, so that's yet to happen. But Ray, one of the things that Mike talked about was that there would be some changes on the coaching staff, and of course, none has happened. Now, you and I have both talked on this show multiple times about how this is a patient thing. It could be about contracts expiring. It could be this. It could be that. But other teams are making moves. Even the Texans fired Bobby Slowick as their offensive coordinator. What do you expect to hear from Art Rooney? Is this a situation where you think that he's going to just explain away why they haven't made moves, or do you expect something to come up today that's going to open up some sort of new insight as far as what the Steelers' plan is for next season?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the only opportunity for reporters who cover the team to ask questions of Art. They'll also get to do it at the owners' meetings in March. So I guess 2 opportunities this year. And yeah, I mean, you want to find out everything, in this setting. What are the plans for next season? How do you plan to combat what happened with the defense late in the season? To me, one of the questions, Chris, that I think is going to be asked is, you spend so much money on your defense, and really they've done that for what, 3 to 5 years now. They've been, if not the NFL's highest paid defense, one of the league's highest paid defenses. And is that the right approach? You look at the Eagles and their team building, all the resources they put into offense. Obviously, the Chiefs, the Steelers have had a little bit of a contrarian view about how to build their roster. Is it time to change that? And I'm sure there's going to be questions about Mike Tomlin. Why did they sign him to a 3-year extension, in the summertime instead of the typical 2-year? Those are all some of the questions that he's going to be asked. And after the way the season ended, Chris, it'll be interesting to see what Art has to say.
It will be interesting because I do wonder what can change about how the Steelers are operating that can help them get over the hump, or at least better prepare themselves to get this transition going. Because again, none of us predicted the Steelers to be Super Bowl contenders this year. If anything, we said, hey, they can get to the playoffs. Maybe they can beat a team, maybe two, but at best they'd be pulling off some crazier upsets to make that second win happen, even if they did get their first win. And now that's where I think that there's some adjusted expectations. But like one thing that Brian Vatko, our colleague, pointed out over the weekend in his story, he wrote about how small the Steelers coaching staff is, and then how all the teams that are still alive, they have bigger coaching staffs, where maybe it's not about what the Steelers coaches are doing, and maybe it's about what they don't have time to do because there's so few of them, and how that's been a philosophy of the Steelers. I wonder if that's something that can be addressed as well, Ray. Like a few years ago when they brought in Brian Flores, he boosted the defense. He was a senior defensive assistant. And then when he left, because that was always going to happen, he was going to go somewhere else shortly after signing with the Steelers. And they never replaced it. It was just a position that they just left vacant and didn't do anything there. And to me, that's something that Art Rooney could account for, as far as like, hey, maybe we need to change our approach and how we see coaches and divvy up tasks throughout week to week in preparation.
Yeah, how about an analytics / time management / video replay coach? I mean, you could have one or two coaches fill all three of those roles, or you can fill them individually. What was it, the Philadelphia game, Chris, where Mike Tomlin said after the game there was that, I think he botched the end of the first half and let like 45 seconds run off the clock. He said he was caught up in something else. So, I mean, there's all kinds of teams across the NFL who have somebody on the sidelines or in the press box to get the coach's attention. Hey, we have to challenge this, or hey, we need to call a timeout here. This is what we do. So the Steelers right now count on Mike to be his own video replay guy. As far as we know, he's taken responsibility for that. And to our knowledge, he doesn't have a time management coach either. And unfortunately for Mike, we've seen multiple occasions where he's butchered the end of a half or the end of a game. So to me, those are things that maybe Art will be asked today. And I think given what's transpired and given what's going on in the NFL today, I mean, you saw how many fourth downs were attempted yesterday in the championship games. The 2-point conversions. It didn't work out for the Bills, but they had the analytics and they decided to go for it when they did. I mean, I think all this stuff is easily solved. You hire a coach or a couple of coaches to do these things. I don't think it's going to break the bank, and maybe you put yourself in a better position to win some football games.
And I think that's part of it, right? Is that, not just the game day management, but the day-to-day management throughout the week is something the Steelers had. You go look back at those Hard Knocks episodes and you can see, guys that weren't even position coaches talking to the Ravens about, hey, like, this is what we got to do against Russell Wilson this week. We got to do this. I know the Steelers have analysts, but maybe it's about getting more analytical coaches who can add to the staff, and their specific job is the run game coordinator. It's not Eddie Faulkner, who's also the running backs coach. It's guys who are specifically brought in to say, hey, I am going to help Arthur Smith generate this run game, make it more efficient. That's going to be my goal. While he's worried on play calls and worrying about matchups, I'm focusing on the things that are hurting our efficiency. And then same thing goes for defense. Terrell Austin, one thing we talked about towards the end of the season, we talked about, hey, why is TJ Watt not moving around? During the middle part of the season, he moved around a little bit, but then in those 5 games that they got on a losing streak, he didn't move from the left side once. And Terrell Austin, he's a secondary coach turned defensive coordinator. Maybe that's not his specialty. Well, you know what? Get somebody whose specialty is they can coordinate the front. They can be the defensive run game coordinator, or specific for that part of the defense. And then that way, it's not Denzel Martin's job, it's not Carl Dunbar's job. They coach their positions just like everybody else. But there's a specific person that Terrell Austin can go to and be like, hey, I need complex fronts. I need to mix things up, and then we'll put that into the game plan. It's those types of things that I think the Steelers could do, and that Art Rooney could answer for. Like, hey, maybe this is what we can do to come into the new age of football. But if there's nothing like that announced today, I do think it'll be interesting to see the fan response, because there's been a lot of visible frustration across the board from the Steelers' lack of postseason success.
Yeah, and listen, Art's going to be asked about it, but I don't think Art is going to announce anything today. The Flores thing developed, I think, in mid-February. There's still times for the Steelers to add somebody like that, but the things I was talking about, Chris, the time management, the video replay thing, you don't have to get high-profile guys to do those jobs. Like, what was it like after Jim Tressel left Ohio State? He was like the video replay guy for like the Colts for a couple of seasons. So it could be even somebody who's out of football now, a former head coach, somebody you trust, somebody who knows what they're doing. You pay them a couple $100,000. They're at every game. They're at the practices. They can help out. And like I said, I think it's a relatively simple fix, to get some of these things rectified.
Absolutely. I want to talk to Ray about what we saw in the playoffs this weekend, as we know who's going to play in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the Eagles. What do we take away from those games and how they play into everything? That's next here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website, moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
It's that time of year again to get the Honda of your dreams during Happy Honda Days, where you'll find great offers on a sporty new Civic, spirited Accord, fun-to-drive HRV, and versatile CRV. So don't wait. Turn your holiday dreams into reality with a new Honda named KBB.com's best value brand. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, what we saw this weekend, we saw one utter beatdown and then another one that wasn't a beatdown. It just felt like it was always going to happen in the Chiefs win. Let's get to the Eagles first, though. Yeah. I said going into that game, you're talking about Saquon Barkley and maybe the best offensive line in football against the third worst run defense in football. Jaden Daniels is a great story and all that, but I thought they were going to mow those guys down. First snap of the offense after the Commanders, they just moved down the field, 18 plays, they get a field goal. First snap for the Eagles, there goes Saquon Barkley. They had 7 rushing touchdowns. I have never seen something like that. If that's what Andy Weidel's trying to help the Steelers get to, it'd be nice if they hurried up the process along the way.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we need about 2 or 3 drafts to make that happen. It's amazing, Chris. I don't think the Commanders played that poorly on offense, but it was just that their defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. It just snowballed and touchdown. I mean, I think the Commanders had 4 turnovers, and I think at least 3 of those, maybe all 4, were converted into touchdowns. And when you turn the ball over in a championship game and the other team isn't, it's going to be an uphill battle. And that was just a disaster for the Commanders. Great season. They got a lot of reason for optimism down there. I think they're going to be a team that's going to have to be reckoned with in the future, but obviously this wasn't their time. This is Philadelphia's time. And I think we'll talk about this matchup more over the coming days with the Chiefs. But I think this Philadelphia team with Barkley is better equipped to challenge a team like the Chiefs than they were a couple of years ago when they lost to them.
No, I agree. I think this Saquon Barkley, for all the talk about should it be Lamar Jackson or should it be Josh Allen MVP, maybe Barkley should be the MVP with the way that he's run the ball. He has changed the Eagles. I mean, and honestly, when you look at how he's played, I mean, the plays he creates, when they give him a little bit of a hole, he turns it into such a big moment for them and just makes things so much easier. And then again, with all the running that you're able to do, Jalen Hurts, who didn't throw much during the playoffs, had 240-ish yards and a touchdown pass in this game. It made things so much easier. That O-line kicked a lot of butt. Just fantastic stuff there. And it will be interesting to see how they run, because they're going to be going up against one of the best run defenses in football against the Chiefs. And let's just, Ray, this is a dominant run of the Chiefs. They've been to 7 straight AFC championship games. They now have their chance to win their 4th Super Bowl in the last 6 years. This is the 5th Super Bowl they've been in during that stretch. This isn't just one of the most insane runs in sports history, in my opinion. I talked about this, online a little bit. Some people want to compare how Patrick Mahomes has dealt with Josh Allen to Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, but Tom Brady only ever beat Peyton Manning twice in the playoffs. Peyton Manning eventually got his get back, and in fact ended his career 3-2 against Tom Brady in the playoffs. And that's when you look back, you're like, wow, I didn't think about that, because just the way it was always talked about. Josh Allen is 0-4 in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes. And the last 3 have been super close games, down to the wire, craziest of endings. And the Chiefs just keep finding a way to win. Against Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow in his career, Patrick Mahomes is 6-1 in the playoffs. He's 17-3 in the playoffs overall. This is the most insane run I've ever seen, and this Chiefs dynasty is one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and you see what home field advantage does for you, Chris. I mean, how many times did they have to go on the road in this run to win? I think last year against the Ravens, one of the few times. Every other game or every other season, they've been like a 1 or a 2 seed, and things have fallen for them, and they've had all these games at Arrowhead, and it's just a huge advantage for them. So, people are going to talk about the referees and the spots and all that, and that's fair game. I mean, they definitely got a break on that fourth and inches. But to me, the great matchup in the Super Bowl is the way the Chiefs front 7 defends the tush push, because we saw Josh Allen struggle with it. Mm-hmm. Josh Allen is 6'5".
Yeah.
Let's see how Jalen Hurts does with it. Now, Jalen Hurts has a knack for it.
Yeah. He's
strong. People talk about how much that guy squats. So maybe he is better at it than Josh Allen. But to me, that's the game within the game. Those short yardage situations. Is it going to be like bang your head up against a brick wall? Somebody going to get creative and maybe call a naked boot or a rollout pass in those situations? I mean, to me, that's the chess match, and that's going to be one of the great things to watch in this game in a couple of weeks.
It certainly will be, and that's the really cool thing. You have 2 really tough defensive fronts. You have 2 really talented secondaries that fly around and make plays. You got 2 run games that are working. Granted, the Eagles have the edge in their run game, with considering they have the best running back in football right now. But you got the best quarterback in football. I mean, maybe some people will say Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, but in my mind, until someone beats Patrick Mahomes, he's still that guy to me. And so I think, whereas this was very predictable because it happened just 2 years ago, and especially once the Lions and Ravens lost, it's like, well, this is pretty much it. And listen, I feel for people that wanted to see the Bills in the Super Bowl, because it would have been something different, and it would have been a pushback against Mahomes is just so dominant. It would have brought parity, but there is no parity when he's 6-1 against the other MVP level quarterbacks in the AFC. It makes it seem like it doesn't matter that there's Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and that he has to go through every year. He doesn't care. He just mows through all of them. And that to me is just really impressive, and something that we're watching historically that I find myself appreciating.
I know what Travis Kelce said, but I think there's part of the Chiefs, if you get them in an honest moment, where they will tell you they were happy the Bengals did not make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
One quarterback who knows how to get it done against Mahomes, it's Burrow. And we could talk about the referees and how the Bengals got jobbed. Was that last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah.
When there was that controversy at the end of that football game. So, 2 years ago. So to me, I think Burrow is maybe the best. Out of them. Maybe there's going to be a time where Allen gets over the hump. Maybe Lamar.
Burrow's the only one that's beating him outside of Tom Brady. No one else has beaten Patrick Mahomes in the postseason.
And those games are always close too, whether it's regular season or in the playoffs. The Bengals just play those guys tough. So, we'll see what happens. I mean, the odd stat of this, Chris, since Joe Burrow came into the league in 2020, the Steelers have made the playoffs more than the Bengals have, but the Bengals have done much more damage once they've gotten there. So it's one of those things. The AFC has a stacked quarterback picture right now. A lot of great players, but Burrow's the only one who's able to challenge Mahomes in those big games.
We'll see if the Eagles can challenge Mahomes in the Super Bowl. That's in 2 weeks, but we got a long way before there. Art Rooney talks later today. Read it at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Jerry Dulac will have that story. We'll keep you posted here. And then what goes on at the Senior Bowl, how we look into the NFL draft class, all here will be decided in the North Shore Drive. What we covered in the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks, Ray, for joining me. Thank you all for joining me here on the North Shore Drive podcast. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, as well as all our daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back Wednesday with more on your Steelers right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.